Howdy folks, it's Kason with Olympus Roofing, and we have with us today Bob Howell, an industry veteran, to talk to us a little bit about metal roofing. So Bob, why don't you just give a brief introduction of your experience here in the roofing industry?
Well, I've been in the roofing industry most of my life, but I've spent the last 20 years in the distribution part of it. I've seen all type of roofing systems. I've seen it done well, I've seen it done bad, commercially, residentially, and there's a lot to consider when you're looking at metal, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think we were talking about it the other day, and you've probably had something like 70,000 roofing projects come across your desk in your time in the industry. So
That sounds like a lot, but yes.
yeah, this is a man that knows what he's talking about when it comes to different types of materials and pros and cons. So we get a lot of questions from our customer base about metal roofing.
Mm-hmm.
When, in your opinion, is metal roofing a viable option to consider? When should you not consider it? What are some of the main pros and cons?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the first thing to really take a look at is it a fit for your home, and also considerably for your budget. I mean,
Yeah.
one, it's a lot more money.
Yeah,
Done right and with quality materials, it's going to be almost 3 times as much as your shingle bid will be,
yep,
without a doubt. But let's talk about what features on your home have to be there for metal to make sense. One, you've got to have a good slope.
Mm-hmm.
You can't. I wouldn't install metal on anything under a 412 pitch. I just wouldn't do it.
okay,
And then also anything that's really cut up, it has a lot of eyebrows, things like that, it's going to be really hard to detail in metal. And metal's not a forgiving product.
right,
And so you up your chances for complications when you've got a more complicated install. The details, I mean, it's not a real pliable product. It doesn't work its way around things very well. I mean, when you've got straight shots and good runs, it works out pretty dang good.
Yeah.
Other than when it's all cut up and janky and this, that, the other, you can run into some real detail issues, and that's where you're going to find your leaks.
yeah. Especially if you're hiring a contractor that maybe doesn't have a ton of experience in metal, those details are going to be really difficult to get absolutely perfect.
Absolutely.
As most homeowners would want their roof to be when they're paying that much for it.
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. The other thing to consider on your home, or if it's a good fit for your project, is one, do you like the sound of metal? Well, a lot of people don't realize until after it's installed, it's a noisy roof.
Yeah.
The rain, you will hear it, unlike you did on your shingle roof or otherwise. Birds on the roof, things like that. It's a loud roof.
Yeah, that's something a lot of people probably don't think about, is that it is going to sound different than your current shingle roof will.
Absolutely.
Yeah. When would you recommend using metal in our market?
You know, I like metal accents and things like that. As a roofing system, it lends itself to a lot of complications that I'm not a huge fan of it in northern Utah because we have one of the highest freeze-thaw tables in the country.
Yeah.
And metal is extremely susceptible to that expansion and contraction. So everyone tells you it's the last roof you're ever going to buy because it's not going to wear out, right? The metal's not going to fall apart. You're not going to wear holes in it. But what's going to happen is all of those joints are going to expand and contract over time, and they're going to loosen, especially if you're using a clip system as opposed to a mechanically seam system.
Yeah.
The other issues you're going to run into with that same movement is fasteners. Everything built around here is built with OSB, which has a very large swing rate of how well it does or doesn't hold a screw. And the movement, though, backs those screws out over time.
Right. So for our customers that might not be familiar with this thermal expansion and contraction we're talking about, this is basically where, as the panels heat and cool in the various seasons, they're going to expand and contract ever so slightly, and over time that's going to kind of wallow out the screws that are holding the panel to the roof, right?
Absolutely. Another consideration is you've got to make sure that where your snow is going to slide off. Here in Utah, we get some strong winters, this, that, the other. That snow piles up everywhere. It doesn't hold it on the roof like a shingle does.
Right.
And so you've got to add extra budget for a emphasis on well-engineered snow retention system.
Yes.
Because a lot of people throw a couple bars up there or a couple brackets up there, and then the snow load gets too heavy, and then it does irreparable damage to your pretty new metal roof. It rips the seams and it yanks off at the clamps, and you can't just go in and piecemeal here and there. You have to replace that whole face 9 times out of 10.
Right.
And that's the other thing, is metal does not lend itself to repairs well. There's not a lot, adding metal to metal really isn't a thing. And if you've got leaks and things like that, it's hard to diagnose.
Yep.
and it's even harder to repair well. There's a
Yeah.
lot of caulk and things involved in the details that, let's just face it, aren't going to last as long as the metal are. So there's a lot of maintenance involved in looking at your roof consistently to make sure where you have applied caulk that it doesn't need reapplied and things like that. There's a lot more maintenance involved. Now the coatings have become better, so they're pretty color fast. If you bought a quality metal from a quality contractor, your color's going to be there. But again, the details where the caulking and things are, that's stuff you've got to pay attention to.
Yeah, yeah. We saw that a lot a couple winters ago when we had that record 900 inches of snow. You know, folks who just kind of eyeballed the snow retention system and said, yeah, we'll just put a couple snow brackets up there. We saw the snow just completely flatten some of those brackets. In other cases, rip them off, damaging
Absolutely.
the seams, just like you were talking about, where you can't really, it's not like a shingle where you can go out and take one or two shingles off and replace them.
No.
You've got to start from one end, work your way all the way over to the point of damage. Usually it ends up just replacing that whole face. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that can get really costly when it comes to repairs if you're not careful.
Without a
Definitely.
doubt. Other considerations is, I mean, there's going to be a lot of contractors. There can be a big swing in metal pricing from contractors based on the quality and the gauge of the material they're using. If it's my
Gotcha.
home, I don't want anything on there under a 24 gauge. Now, the lower the number, the heavier and thicker the material is, the higher the number, the thinner and lighter it is. I
Right.
mean, there are guys out there trying to install 29 gauge material, which is only a little bit thicker than what you'd put in your gutters, and sometimes
Right.
actually thinner than what you have in your rainwear. So always ask your contractor, what gauge of metal am I getting? And what is the finish on that metal? What is the paint warranty? Those kinds of things are extremely important when considering a metal roof for your project.
Right, because even if the metal lasts for 40, 50, 60 years, it might look terrible after
And
10,
perform
15,
worse.
20.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Right. So when we talk about longevity of a roofing system, the functional lifespan is much different than the aesthetic lifespan, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Of, how long do you want this to be on your roof? Yeah. Yeah. Good. So why is it that metal is so much more expensive to install? If in some cases it is kind of an inferior product in our market.
It's extremely labor intensive, and the material is just more money. I mean, steel is a commodity, but very little of it is made in the U.S. anymore, so it's always imported, and the prices go up and down. But the varies down aren't very much. I've never, in the last 10 years, I've seen steel do nothing but go up steadily.
Yeah, yeah. So the labor is intensive, and you probably have to have more skilled labor, which means
Absolutely.
more expensive labor.
Absolutely.
You've got really expensive materials. You also have to have some unique machinery to print the metal panels, to cut the metal panels and get it exactly right for the dimensions of your roof, right?
100%.
Can you talk a little bit about what the installation process looks like on the day of the job? You've bought a metal roof. What can our customers expect as far as that installation?
Sure. I mean, the contractor's going to roll up usually, well, there's two different ways they go about it. Some contractors roll up with their own equipment and have a roll forming panel trailer that will run each panel out to length on site.
Yep.
Those guys tend to know what they're doing because that machine isn't cheap, and there's going to be a big coil on it. They're going to start out as a flat coil and roll out as the panel profiles cut to the length you need. Now, there's other guys who are going to come up and they're going to show up with a bunch of crates that are going to be unloaded at a piece at a time, and they're going to put it together like a jigsaw puzzle. They've pre-measured everything ideally and measured it well so that they come up and just piece it together one at a time. And if it's my house, though, I want someone who's making it on the job.
Right. Just in case they run into anything that they didn't plan for, they can kind of adapt on the fly.
Absolutely.
And make sure that they're doing it right. Whereas if
Absolutely.
you've pre-ordered it and you're missing a piece, or
I can really delay a project in a hurry.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, and the best turnaround times from my manufacturers and suppliers I use is about 4 days.
Right.
Unless you need it. I mean, they keep screws and things on hand, but usually each piece of metal is unique to the project.
Right.
And needs to be rebent at the correct degrees and angles and things like that. And if it's a pre-manufactured gig, you can run into some real snags.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're kind of sitting there twiddling your thumbs until that new piece comes in or whatever you need in order
Truly.
to finish the job.
Truly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Gotcha. What other things do you think our homeowners should be considering when thinking about a metal roofing system? Have we missed anything?
Slope, retention. Not that I can think of. I mean, there's the foot traffic on a metal roof is harder. I mean, how much people are up and down on their own roofs, I don't know, but metal, I mean, it doesn't lend itself well to being walked on.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got ribs in between that you can dent it easily. If you're up there hanging Christmas lights and things like that, like some people are, it's a slicker surface, it's a hotter surface. Those are all things to be considered.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you can scratch that paint and that finish and things like that. And if you get into, just like your car or anything else, if you get through the finish, then you're susceptible to rust.
Right.
And things like that as well.
Right.
So
yeah, definitely something to consider if somebody does, get on their roof regularly to clean gutters or hang Christmas lights or whatever.
If you have an air conditioner, things like that,
right,
you changed out.
Right. That metal is really slick. It's not like a shingle roof where if you slip and fall,
You've got traction.
You're stuck there. You got traction on the shingles. If you slip and fall on a metal roof, you're gaining speed until you go right off the edge.
No doubt.
Sliding. Yeah.
No doubt.
What considerations should they be making in regards to underlayment for a metal roof?
Underlayment, that's another cost driver for metal. As metal gets extremely hot, like we just talked about, you've got to have a higher temperature rated ice and water shield, because if not, then it melts and bleeds out, and you'll see it run down the fascia and different things like that. So that's another big cost driver for the metal roof, is that the underlayments are more expensive because they have to be able to withstand the heat that the metal transfers to your roofing surface.
Yeah, so typically you're using like a high temp ice and water barrier on the entire surface of the roof, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, all good things to think about as you're considering whether or not you should go metal on your roofing system. There may be some markets where metal is certainly a better fit, but as a general rule of thumb here in Utah, I think using metal for accents, using metal for maybe smaller portions of your roof, like over the front porch, we see that a lot, or over a dormer, more aesthetic accent pieces. It's probably a good fit, but as far as an entire roofing system, our recommendation would probably be to consider something that's going to be a little bit better fit, like a nice shingle roofing system or something of that nature.
That's what I have on my house.
That's great. Well, thank you for your input, Bob, and hopefully this helps anyone that's considering going metal.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.